I think I'm live. Pretty sure I'm live. Good morning, folks. Today's episode. Welcome. Today we're going to be talking about basically the 10 things that will eat you alive as a charging provider. So, this is to all the Tesla supercharger networks, Electrify America networks, EVgo networks. These are all basically charging networks across the US, maybe across the world too. I'm pretty sure all of them would apply. But I wanted to go ahead and kind of, there's a lot of talk out there with this new consortium that the 7 major auto OEMs, got together and basically, formed this consortium. Says that, they're going to install 30,000 charging stations, over the next, 4 or 5 years. And so I just wanted to kind of bring to light really the astronomical task that it's going to take for them to be able to not only execute on this plan, but also to make the plan profitable in that point. So if you really look at the nuts and bolts, that's basically what we're here today to kind of talk about. So, all things considered, that's what today's episode is about. We're brought to you by Smart Charge America. I am Joseph Barletta, and this is the Charge Your Life podcast where we discuss EVs and all things EV charging. So, again, I wanted to thank everyone for pulling over and parking with us today. I know this is a little bit of a live stream. So, that's it. A little bit about myself. I'm the founder and CEO of Smart Charge America. So, today's episode is brought to you by Smart Charge America. So since 2007, we've been installing tens of thousands of charging stations nationwide. And basically, we can do the same exact for you guys today. If you're in the market for an EV and you need that charging station, or if you're commercial, or if your charging station needs service, give us a call. We help you out. You can visit us at smartchargeamerica.com today to get started. And remember, if you can't charge, you can't drive. So that's basically it in a nutshell. We did, as a company, open our doors on August 15th, 2007. So if I'm not mistaken, our anniversary is coming up next week. So kind of cool. But before we, we dived in or dived down into this topic, I definitely wanted to kind of do a disclaimer. We are ourselves a charging network. We are a charging provider. And so I feel like maybe we're kind of shooting ourselves in the foot here by discussing these things, but I definitely wanted to bring to light, because I've gone to a lot of expos and I've gone to a lot of these shows, and there's always this case that open up your own charging network, you're going to make a lot of money. And there's this massive amounts of funding that's been drawn down and going into some of these companies that basically these investors, they don't know. People really that are removed from the industry, they really don't have the ability to kind of really tune in and look at this stuff. And that's where we come in. So all things considered, 10 things that will literally eat you alive as a charging provider. Number 1 is the high capital cost of the equipment. Typically, these DC fast chargers, and we're just talking about DC fast chargers now with this particular conversation. I don't want to go into the level 2 realm. Level 2 realm, you do have a lot of these factors that could affect the level 2 charging providers. However, it's basically exacerbated with the DC fast charging charging provider. So all things considered, if you look at the high capital cost for the equipment, it's up there. You also have to look at kind of the availability for the equipment. I remember we had a client. Well, hell, I could tell you who they were because they never really went with us anyway. 7-Eleven came to us a while back, and they wanted to talk about how they wanted to roll out 5,000 DC fast charging stations all over their all across their portfolio here in the U.S. and what it's going to take. And I was like, guys, that's great. You guys want to do this all for next year, but I can tell you right now, and put it in an order for 5,000 units. You can place an order with every manufacturer out there, and they're still not going to be able to generate, 5,000-10,000 units. So there's also product availability, for a lot of these OEMs. They can't produce the products fast enough. So, but on that end, that is number one, is you're looking at the high capital cost for the equipment. Number two, if you're looking at the high capital cost for the installation, I mean, look at the amount of stuff, the engineering plans, blueprints, drawings, civil work, utility design criteria, all the transformers, everything that basically goes into, an electric DC fast charging site. Sometimes you just put in one charging station, that's fine. Other times you're putting in 12, 10. So all in all, if you really look at the electrical, I guess, installation, like kind of the labor and the equipment, the copper, the transformers, utility drops, like everything, it's a massive undertaking. So those are the 1 and 2. That's gonna, before you do anything, that right there is gonna eat your lunch. So again, number one, high capital cost for the equipment. Number two, high capital cost for the installation. Number three, you do and you will incur ongoing software cellular plan cost as an electric charging provider to the cellular networks or to the software networks that you've basically entrusted to run your operations. And so these are ongoing fees that you're constantly having to pay per unit, sometimes per port, for that particular site. So number 4, ongoing electric usage costs. So you still, as an electric provider, have to pay for the electricity that's being dispensed out of those chargers. But, of course, if you're like, let's say your bill is, 10 cents a kilowatt, well, hopefully you're charging 20 or 30 cents a kilowatt in order to make up the delta in the form of profitability. But it's not like you're just making let's say 30 cents per kilowatt. That's not all profit. Like, you still have to pay the 10 cents from the electric usage, the actual bill, from that. And then you are able to get the actual delta itself. So going into number 5, if you look at the ongoing service and maintenance costs that it's going to cost you for that particular unit, we're looking at somewhere, if you're going to budget like $1 million for a site, let's say for, 8 DC fast chargers, you want to budget at least 10% of that for all things service and maintenance costs. And that could fluctuate, could be a little bit more, could be a lot less. But in general, if you want to budget that 10%, that's kind of where you're looking at. So, all things considered, that is an ongoing cost, whether it's realized when it actually happens or over the next 5 years or 7 years, however long that site is operational. You will have to incur service and maintenance costs of some sort. And so number 6, service parts and inventory cost. Now, this one was pretty unique. We didn't really realize this one until like COVID hit, but in general, like these charging providers, they would guarantee, that, look, if a station's down, we'll come out and we'll repair it. We'll have, between 24, 72 hours to repair. That's our downtime. We pride ourselves in our uptime, repairability. But most of the problems that happened during COVID was the supply chain issues and shortages. And so you can write contracts and give charging, providers all of this stuff. But if they don't have the parts to be able to source for that repair, those stations are going to remain down, and they're going to remain down even longer. And so that's number 6, service parts and inventory cost. It does cost the provider money to stock those parts, to house those parts. And, if you're looking at carrying costs, inventory costs, so forth and so on, that is something that you definitely want to take into consideration as a charging provider. And number 7, you're looking at the ongoing technical networking support cost. I mean, that's with not only the compatibility and the testing of the units when they actually are deployed, but also the field tech guys out there doing the installs, troubleshooting, doing those repairs. You need a staff on the back end that's able to basically kind of fundamentally figure out with your networking dashboard and everything else from the data that you have, how to get this station kind of back up and running. So that is definitely one of the other ones that not too many people realize. It's the ongoing technical and networking support that you have. And now that's the technical support. Now you also need like personnel, which is number 8, to basically monitor and manage the cost that, you have to pay their salaries. You have to, buy their equipment so that people are, on the phone, customer support, customer care, that sort of thing. You're going to have to, have a warehouse or outsource or something like that. But that is definitely going to be an additional cost that's charging providers going to have to incur as a result of setting up their network. And then, of course, you have number 9 is going to be your utility demand charges. And so, you have those peak hours, generally between, I would say, 12 and 8 o'clock. Most of the time you have like peak, and then you have like super peak. Super peak generally is typically from like 2 o'clock to 8 o'clock. So, or 2 to 6, depending on where you're at, how your utility defines their time of use rates. So those demand charges, they are also passed through to the actual charging provider, and the charging provider has to be able to have like fixed prices, across the board. They can't pass that on to their customers. So what they have to do is just try to manage that the best they can, and hope that a majority of their charging, stuff is, I guess, charging utilization is done, kind of during those off-peak hours. But they also have to really take into consideration those demand charges. So there's a lot of lobbyists, there's a lot of kind of laws out there that, and like strategies and like, I guess, market talks with these charging providers, talking with local utility companies to see if possibly their PUCs can grant charging station providers, sort of a, I don't know, like a pass, hey, look, everyone else, we're going to charge demand charges, but since you're an electric fueling, depot, and you're an electric charging provider, we're just not going to assess those to you. And that's not going to happen. The utility companies are definitely going to enforce those demand charges. So where there are demand charges, I don't see, I haven't really seen a price structure from a charging provider that basically has like surge pricing, where if you charge during this time of the day, you're gonna get charged a little bit more. But I wouldn't be surprised, but I don't know if there's legality behind the pricing structure, so whether or not you can do that or not. So that's number 9. Number 10, site host fees. Got to understand, these charging providers, they don't own the land that the actual charging stations sit on. They actually have to have an agreement with the property management or the actual ownership of the land for those parking, spots, or wherever the charging stations are located. And so generally you have these site host agreements that are signed between the charging provider and the site host. And the charging provider will agree to the site host, hey, we'll pay for all the electrical that's going to come out of here, and we'll maybe, allow you to make profits on top of that, on top of, that. So if it costs 10 cents a kilowatt, pay you, 3 cents a kilowatt for every, on top of that, as a result of like our site host fee, like our lease agreement. But some property managers, they're like, nah, if you want this property, this is what these cost me. It's going to cost you, $700 a month to operate, on my site for this. So depending on how the site host agreements are set up, you could have, like one of the things where like, hey, look, the more we utilize this site and the more the stations get, used, Mr. Site Host, you'll get paid more. Or it's just a flat fee. Site host doesn't care if it gets used 1,000 times, or if it gets used once, they're wanting, their straight, money there. So, but one of the definite concerns is if we're going to set up a new meter, and all of that stuff, the site host definitely wants the charging provider fully responsible for all the electrical that comes out of that actual, dispenser. So that's the 10 reasons. Those are the 10 things that will literally eat you alive as a charging provider. But I'm going to give you one more. And this one is a bonus. You can look at it as a bonus. So number 11 was planned obsolescence of the technology that you're buying, and the shifts in industry demands that will force that planned obsolescence on the technology that you're already investing. So one of the things you're looking at is, okay, we're going to put 150 DC fast charging stations in the ground here. Well, by the time you source it, you do your procurement, you do your engineering plan, utility design criteria, utility drops, permits, inspections, rollout, bidding process, all of that stuff. It's probably 9 to 12 months before that station is probably energized. Maybe if you can get it energized faster, great. If not, the industry has probably already come out with a better. And by the way, if you're not really doing your research, you probably should have put in 250 kW stations, because that's where the industry and kind of the market is coming. So if you really look at those, like, that's all the things that are against when it comes to DC fast charging and being a charging provider. And so you have to really know how to navigate these waters and play the fields to the best of your ability to make the best, kind of give you the best chance of survival inside your network. So all things considered, that's it. Definitely wanted to share with you guys a little bit of kind of inside knowledge on charging providers. And so maybe next time you're at a charging site, or, you're at one of those, superchargers or, Electrify America chargers, and you see a few of them are down, but some of them are working, try not to give them a hard time. That's all I'm saying. It's a lot. It's very difficult to get these stations in the ground and keep these networks running. You have a lot of things that are constantly going against you. And so these guys are doing the best they can with what they have to get things going. So what we're going to do is we'll pass it through to our customer audience. And so it looks like I have some questions here. One of our guys says, what do you see the role of batteries playing in the future of DC fast charging or residential charging? So we know that Tesla, from the secret sauce we went over last week, was like Tesla's like the closest gap, or I guess closest manufacturer to fill in that gap when it comes to batteries being on site. So batteries being on site, again, is going to increase your total equipment costs. It's also going to increase your high capital, like, installation costs. But at the same time, it's definitely going to lower your demand charges, for that particular site. So where there is increase, there's also lowering that. So but you still have those costs that you can incur. But all in all, for that site to be able to really be like kind of that circular loop that you want it to be, you want to have both batteries and solar powering your individual station. I mean, think about if the utility, if there's a hurricane, boom, knocks out gas stations and power for 2 weeks. But you have a DC fast charging site that's set up that has solar and battery backup, and you're kind of fully sustained, I guess, until the clouds go away from the storm, and hopefully the sun continues to shine. Hopefully you'll have enough power to from your solar panel system to generate power for your batteries, and then of course dispense through your DC fast charger. So that's the role that we see, but battery prices are so high still, it's going to exacerbate that installation cost and that equipment cost. And so whether or not how much of that offsets the demand charges is one thing, but when you put solar and batteries together, that's when you get that circular loop. So, residential charging too, I mean, you look at the power walls. Most of the power walls we're seeing people have is when they have a solar system, but we do have customers that have power walls. They just want a general backup system for their house, just in case the power grid goes down. They have enough power that they can tap into to maybe feed their home for 13 hours, maybe 2 days or something. And so, depending on how many power walls you actually have in the residential setting, could allow your system to limp along while the power is down. But in general, just like with commercial, residential, you really want to have that solar means of being able to produce that power and go from there. So let's see here. David says time of use rates are different than demand charges. Yes, I understand. But what I was trying to tell you is that demand charges are sometimes kind of paralleled inside the same, time frame. And so your demand charges basically when the I guess the site is really pulling out so much power, they're going to tax you on that. So, let's see what else. Not necessarily the amount you did. Yes, that is correct. So you keep freezing. Well, I don't know. We're hooked up Wi-Fi. Maybe we need to get this bad boy. Maybe we need to get our live sessions kind of going with a hardcore Ethernet cable. So, but that's it. I definitely wanted to make sure you guys knew some sort of a little bit of the hardships that go along with creating that charging, provider, for them going out there and creating that network. They have a lot of things against them. And generally, when I pass up a site, if it's a few DC fast chargers in sight, I'm like, yeah, this is it's about $1 million, maybe $1.5 million, sometimes $2 million in investment for all things considered to just basically make this site happen, just that it's there. So I always try to tell my guys, try not to be too hard on them. Just show a little appreciation. If you can help them out, help them out. But other than that, I definitely wanted to kind of give you guys kind of a deeper dive into all things charging providers and the 10 things that will absolutely eat you alive as a charging provider. So give them some slack, cut them a little bit, and definitely go out there and show your appreciation by joining, their networks. But other than that, definitely appreciate you guys listening in our audience. Look, I'm better for it. I know you guys are better for it. Go ahead and click the thumbs up icon. Let us know if you like it. Go ahead and subscribe, share, all that good stuff. We love you. We thank you so much for pulling over and parking with us today. And I guess we'll see you on the next one. So cheers, guys.